Hey, how you doing? This is RJ. So recently I was going through my backlog of videos that I made for 2023, thinking I would do a retrospective video of the entire year, and I realized very quickly what that retrospective video would be. It would be about the fact that 2023 is the year the back of woke entertainment was broken. And I honestly think in the future that when people look back at 2023, they will say that, yeah, that's the year that woke entertainment died. Now, whether or not we can say the same for woke culture, whether we can say the same about woke politics and woke companies, well, that's a different matter. It may take a little longer for those, but I certainly think that it is true for woke entertainment. And by the way, in saying that, I am sure that someone in the comments, because they always do, someone will say, you don't even define what woke is. How in the world can I take you seriously? Well, again, if you want to go through my backlog of videos, you can find the video where I do that. And historically, where the term comes from and what it means, it was from a black jazz musician. This was back in the 1950s, I do believe. And he talked about how black people needed to become awoke to their plight of being oppressed. Which is to say, it was just a pop culture way of saying that black people needed to be treated as and act as a group and realize their oppression according to that group status, which plays right into what it is today, the ideological idea that it was birthed out of and is still attached to, which is the fact that all groups can be categorized into either oppressed or oppressor, and that you need to determine your actions based upon those group statuses. Which, honestly, ideologically, it just comes from Marxist ideology. But I'm not going into the political very much today at all. I'm just giving that definition for those people who will inevitably bring up that point in the comments. I am going to focus on the death of woke entertainment. And, oh, by the way, there are 2 links in the description and the pinned comment for my 3 graphic novels if you want some non-woke entertainment, just pure good storytelling, excitement, and fun. I have 2 superhero graphic novels and a low fantasy sword and sorcery graphic novel. You're looking at some of the beautiful art for those in the background. So if they appeal to you in any way, click on those links and go on over and order yourself a copy of my graphic novels today. All right, so what I'm going to do to discuss the death of woke entertainment within 2023 is simply go through the key points that I covered within my videos for 2023, and then examine them as a whole to show you the theme of the death of woke entertainment. Because in going through my old videos for last year or this year, depending on when you're listening to it, I found that very on in the year, early in February, about how the conservative mindset was, in the prior year, really cementing itself as the new counterculture. And let's look at how that played out within 2023. Now, I'm not going to go through all my videos, obviously, just the high points. Now, the first thing that I noticed was that while my content still focuses a lot on comic books and goes back to the comic industry as a microcosm for entertainment and everything that's wrong with it, I did very little in the way of covering the comic industry specifically within each of my videos. Sure, I referenced it and would use those references again to support my point, but I stopped really covering just specifically the comic industry within videos. Why? Because people, as far back as the 1st of 2023, no longer watch those videos. Why? Well, it's because everybody who follows the comic industry, even in a slight way, knows that the quote-unquote woke progressive people have taken over and pretty much destroyed the comic industry so much that it is, at this point, irredeemable. So, to some extent, doing videos about that is simply beating a dead horse. I decided within 2023 to actually take the opposite tact of complaining and just showing up the faults of the current comic industry, and I would focus on the positive, and that's where I do my live streams, which started out as interviews with great comic artists of the past, and it morphed into my fireside chats of Make Comics Great Again and my comic book team up with John's Longbox that I now do every Wednesday evening, where we try to focus on the future of comics, the great past of comics, and what those 2 things should have in common. But in focusing on other science fiction and fantasy products out there, the first one I did in January that really struck a chord was when Dungeons & Dragons decided to basically strangle its audience by extracting as much money as possible out of them while giving them inferior products again and again. And quite literally, these are in part the statements of Dungeons & Dragons themselves, saying they needed to maximize profitability for their products by putting them in venues like exclusive online content, which you can only access by paying subscriptions for, etc., things like that. And really, I think that was a good video to set the tone for the entire year. Why? Because you have this company who is captured by your quote unquote progressive, quote unquote woke entertainment. And what do? Well, they assume they have a stranglehold on their audience. They assume that they can tell their audience what it is they're going to be purchasing in the future. Not ask their audience, not work with their audience, not study what has merit, what is selling, any of that stuff. They just assume that, yeah, we have control of this product. We can do what we want with this product. We're telling you we're going in this direction with it. You're going to like it and you're going to buy it. And that was really the first thing in the year for a company to get a wake-up call, because many Dungeons & Dragons aficionados basically told the company, go take a long walk off a short pier, especially if you're going to try to monetize the Dungeons & Dragons based material that other people had created for themselves, and they were trying to take that over as well. That's really the nub of what ticked people off, because they were saying, we have so much control over this thing we created that if you created anything even similar based on the rules, yeah, we now own it. And there was quite a backlash against that, so much so that Dungeons & Dragons had to walk that back severely. They're still trying to push it. They still want to get there, but they had to backpedal fairly quickly. Moving on, in late January, early February, I was still doing videos about the backlash against Velma, the so-called Scooby-Doo reboot, which again is basically the people who are creating this property based on old entertainment, poking the entire audience in the eye, saying, yeah, we can do what we want with this product. We control it. We're going to go headlong into woke progressive entertainment just to make you people upset, just so we can feel like we have some cultural relevance. And honestly, all that I really need to bring out of that incident is just how much disdain these people who work in the entertainment industry, who follow woke entertainment, who follow woke politics and agree with that ideology, how much disdain they have for the normal person. And while I would argue it has always been that way, this was really one of the key points wherein people started to recognize that. Normal people started to recognize that. Because honestly, you're taking a cartoon from a lot of people's childhood and you're twisting it up according to identity politics in order to poke them in the eye. Yeah, it rubbed people the wrong way. Then in February, I also did a video on creative stakeholders, which was really the first time I ran across this very specific language, which means it was probably becoming more and more part of the mainstream. And it's the idea that everyone has a stakehold in what you're creating as entertainment. Therefore, everyone, quote unquote, everyone, gets to have a say in what's being produced, not just the people who are producing it. This, by the way, is the language of ESG and social credit scores, basically saying that the people who are fans of the product that they're buying, people who are the supporters of the product, they don't really have a say by telling you whether or not it has merit. No, it belongs to the entire society. And again, once again, as I talked about at the first when I was discussing the definition of woke, it's all according to the group dynamics and the oppressor and the oppressed, and they get to have the most say, by the way. And that's what creators need to internalize before they even make any kind of entertainment. That's at the forefront of your woke, quote unquote, progressive mentality towards what creative people have to do if they want to make a creative product. Then, as I mentioned, I did that video in February about the conservative mindset being the new counterculture, and also focusing on the retreat of woke entertainment at that time. Then, even as far back as February, March, I was talking about, and continue to talk about throughout the year, the new Miles Morales Spider-Man products, including Into the Spider-Verse 2, how it lacked any true creativity, which again culminated in my videos later on in the year, talking about what people really thought of the movie and how this played out within a movie that was visually what most people would declare as overstimulating, but being creatively unoriginal, while at the same time, in the background, pushing your quote-unquote progressive woke messaging. This was also part of my series of videos I did on meta-modernism, where entertainment wants to go in the future, moving on from postmodernism into meta-modernism, where they basically say, we know there is no truth, but wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Let's just pretend like there is some truth and then have some fun with the spectacle. And that can be seen in movies like Into the Spider-Verse, as well as Everything All at Once. Then we moved squarely back into the territory of Dungeons and Dragons when D&D released its new revamping of the Ravenloft material, basically sanitizing the entire thing and of course making it very quote unquote inclusive so that you could no longer have this vampire which was served by gypsies. No, you had to have the gypsies be the hero and the cultural icon that you are playing within, and you must recognize all of these quote unquote progressive woke norms in doing so. And I covered the writers, because there were several writers for this new revamping of Ravenloft, and went into their background and how each of them was chosen specifically because A, they were heavily progressive, quote unquote progressive, and B, because they were going to poke the normal audience in the eye. And once again, this became a cultural touchstone for the year for, at the very least, science fiction and fantasy fans to some extent, because once again, you had the company saying, we own this thing, we can do what we want with it, and you're going to like it and buy it. And when I did more than just scratch the surface of the history of the women who were writing this new product for Dungeons and Dragons, I found an old article that one of them had done about 10 years prior, talking about, and I quote, "Women are destroying science fiction, but that's okay. We created it." Which again, I could not come up with a better summary in one line of exactly the mentality of your woke entertainment. It's the fact that we control this thing, we can do what we want with it, so much so that if we wish to destroy it and build it up anew, which is what woke entertainment is doing over and over again, if they want to do that, then you're just going to have to lump it. You have no choice. But about in that point of the year, that's when the cracks within your woke entertainment started to turn into full-blown fissures. That's when movies like The Sound of Freedom came out and did spectacularly well, at the very least, according to how much money it used to be made. You had the Target and Coors Light incidents beginning, wherein there was a severe customer backlash against both these companies because they decided to take their product or their ways of selling products and just shove progressive messaging straight in the face of people. And again, you have to realize that these are just normal people, people who go to Target, people who drink light beer when they come home from work. These are the people they were ticking off at this point. And again, these are turning points within the year and the death of woke ideology, which, yes, still is to come, but really is going to begin with the death of woke entertainment. And I say that because this is where people started to realize what they could do. Quite honestly, giving people, normal people, the ammunition to actually go after these companies. Now, I still hold that get woke, go broke doesn't actually work. I don't think Coors Light, even though it has severely impacted their bottom line, they're never going to go broke. But that's not the point. The point is that in doing so, in creating something that was obviously getting pushed back on by the people who would normally buy this product, they have given ammunition to many people so that they can now, in effect, sue the company. Because if you actually have shares in that company and you're looking at what the people who are running it are doing, and you can see that they're moving in the opposite direction of actually making money for the product which you hold shares for, yes, you can bring a suit against these companies. This is a very extremely important point, in my opinion. Maybe it's just my legal background, but this is where the true power and the true point of the death of woke entertainment comes in. Because the same thing happened with Disney. Disney, at the end of this year, just a month ago or so, had to file a bunch of documents which admitted that, yes, they were going in the opposite direction than the normal everyday person wanted to see within their entertainment. And the reason why they were putting these filings into the court system to begin with is to stop, to try to end run around the fact that people could actually sue them in the way that I have just described. And as I said, I'm not going to get very far into the political, but you have to realize that why this is actually happening is that this was, in part, the strategy of the far left for quite some time now. It's bake my cake or I'll call you a bigot and then take you to court. But people have started to realize that, yeah, they can do the same. Why? Well, it's pretty political. It's because, number one, like him or not, Mitch McConnell, since almost the beginning of the Obama administration, stymied any appointment of higher court judges so that when Donald Trump got into office, then they opened the floodgates and the people who got into these offices and were then appointed were all conservative. Not to mention the fact that they had some good luck and have now turned the Supreme Court of the land into a originalist court, which is to say they're conservative minded in the fact that they try to go back to what was originally intended for the Constitution rather than a quote unquote progressive way, a modern way of looking at it and reinterpreting it. And so if you have the higher court judges of the entire land, which again, you can appeal court decisions upward to over and over again until you get to the Supreme Court, which is the final say in the land. If you have them being manned by people who have this mindset, then yeah, you have an appeal to the law. You have an appeal to, at the very least, begin to make an argument, begin to make these cases against these companies, and again, hurt the companies. Because quite honestly, I don't think the companies, even though they are staffed over and over again by people who believe in woke progressive politics, I don't think that that is the main reason or the main excuse for them to go in that direction. The main excuse was, bake my cake or I'll sue you. It's to say, we don't want to lose money. We don't want to get sued. We don't want to have this happen to our company. Therefore, just go along with it. No one's going to care. Yeah, people do care. Now they're going to sue you for the opposite. Therefore, they're starting to take a quick second look at going in this direction. And that, in part, is why we see the next two videos that I did were focusing on this exact waffling of these companies. You had news coming out from Netflix and insiders within Netflix saying the company has already bowed to the pressure of the woke left. But the point is that you have insiders at that time saying, yeah, this is what they're doing. Perhaps they should not do this. And releasing that information, of course, to the general public, and have decided to get rid of its audience participation in the making of their entertainment, basically the audience scores of what they would give it, whether they would want it changed or not from the test screenings. Why? Because they focus too much on, and I quote, straight white men. That is to say, they tended towards entertainment where straight white men were the protagonist. And, well, the company just couldn't have that. Then there was the very interesting fact that the woke left was crying foul when Scholastic, in doing its fall book fairs, decided to take the quote-unquote progressive section of their books and put them in a separate package so that the librarians could show them if they wanted to, but they wouldn't be mixed together with the regular books automatically. Why? Because Scholastic was afraid that it was going to get sued and therefore lose its entire business model, which is to say, lose its ability to sell books within public school systems. And the very interesting part of how I came across all of that was, again, one of those writers for Dungeons & Dragons who produced that Ravenloft series came out and made a statement saying, diversity is not a choice. And if Scholastic is going to choose to take the diverse books and put them in a separate package, then they need to be punished. Then this fissure started to open even wider with the release of pictures from Disney's new live-action remake of Snow White and people just ridiculing it into the ground because of its inclusive nature, I'll put that in quotes again, trying to take these 7 dwarves from the original story and turn them into something completely different. Why? Because it wasn't inclusive enough. And again, being soundly mocked for it. And then the bomb of the Marvels came out, which again highlighted the fact that these kind of quote-unquote progressive stories, that is to say, stories that are centered around a progressive message, are not something that is going to have a good story. It broke the idea from the first Captain Marvel movie that it did spectacularly well on its own because people liked it. No, it did spectacularly well because it was sandwiched right in there between all the other movies and the culmination of the entire storyline for the MCU at that time, and people thought they had to go and watch it in order to understand that culmination. No, people didn't like it, and they showed Disney and Marvel and the entire world that they didn't like it with the release of the Marvels and how spectacularly poorly it did. This, by the way, being the culmination of so many failures of superhero movies for the entire year. Flash and Blue Beetle and Aquaman, which has just come out, not to mention the Marvel ones, like the Marvels, like Ant-Man, like the multiple series coming out from Marvels on television. Nobody cares about the story because the writers don't care about the story. Oh, I should include She-Hulk definitely in that. But the point is that with those, on the one hand, you have progressive messaging, which just pokes its audience in the eye. On the other hand, you have a disrespect for storytelling at its fundamental level. Why? Because they shoot multiple endings and do multiple reshoots. And so you can't really have a consistent view, a consistent storyline, a consistent idea of where your movie is going to start and end if you can just put together a whole bunch of pieces and then switch them out when you're done. That's not respect for storytelling. That's most notably what people would call committee storytelling, which is to say a committee gets to decide what happens. And quite simply, it appeals to no one. Honestly, I would say, since these are American-made products, they disregard the American mindset of taking risk. The American mindset of go big or go home. And if you're not going to do that, if you're going to play it safe, then go away. And sure, that means you might have spectacular failures, but that also means that you might have spectacular successes. Which, again, if you concentrate on merit, which woke politics does not, but if you did, it would work out in the end. And then we had the release of the South Park episode, which made fun of the entire woke entertainment system, which is summed up in that faux quote, put a woman in it and make her gay, instead of actually, producing a good product. And by the way, I have to say that, yes, even though this is very much one of those turning points for the entire year, because once again, it showed normies that, yeah, everybody is severely mocking this. That's kind of the point. South Park is not a trailblazer. South Park is playing it safe. They are just the first ones to break that seal. Because, of course, I and people like me have been talking about this for at least 6 to 7 years now, minimum. And we're just the product of that disdain for woke entertainment almost 10, sometimes 20 years prior to when we started talking. Then, at the end of the year, very recently, we had the release of Godzilla -1 and how it showed up the entire Hollywood entertainment system by producing a movie which had a fraction of the budget that Hollywood movies have, but has been not only received spectacularly well, but has had praise heaped upon it by your normal, everyday people, myself included. And really, the cherry on top of this entire thing would be the fact that you saw how much of a toll this was taking on the people producing this quote-unquote woke progressive entertainment by having Mark Waid, co-creator of some iconic graphic novels like Kingdom Come, saying, yeah, we're not going to share the comic industry with your, as he calls them, far-right individuals, which is to say anyone who's not far left. And he said he, and those like him, would rather burn it to the ground. And this is the cherry on the top for the year because it shows that people who are producing this woke progressive entertainment understand that they're losing. Not only that they're losing, but they're going to lose. That really, yes, the back has been broken for their woke messaging and their woke entertainment. That the entire system is starting to rebalance itself and purge these people from its ranks. Now, is that going to happen all at once? No. And again, people like Mark Waid, who are the higher-ups in that industry, are going to try to destroy the entire thing before it can go back to being something that is a system based on merit. But again, that's the point I'm concentrating on, because they understand it. And if they understand it, that this is what they need to do in order to, in their minds, save whatever industry it is that they're working in, they will destroy it to save it. Then the rest of us need to realize that, yeah, we're having a lot of impact on what is going on. We are actually making some headway. And that you can look forward to the destruction of woke entertainment and really woke ideology. And the thing is that this is not a series of random events that I have covered over the year. No, there is a very specific tie to the entire thing, a very specific theme and thread that runs through it all. And what is it? Well, it's normal people realizing that they don't need to be afraid of your progressive left anymore. Because quite honestly, that is the heart of the entire progressive movement. It is fear. They boil everything down to power politics, which is to say group politics, because individuals don't matter. It's all about groups. And power is the most important part of the group dynamic. And they will use that power to intimidate and scare and force people into the mindset that they want them to have. I actually did a video around the middle of the year talking about how Marvel thinks that it is appealing to a younger audience, that is to say, young children with their stories. How? By fear and manipulation. I went into, in that video, a couple of statements coming out from Marvel, very specifically one where they were talking about, it was from the prior year, I do believe, a Halloween episode where they discussed, at the very least one of the women, how she had a niece, and her niece used to wake up in the middle of the night screaming because she was afraid that climate change was going to destroy the entire planet. And she was saying, yeah, we need to create stories around that. We need to harness that kind of thinking. Basically saying we have to use that fear in order to instill more fear in order to progress our messaging. And that's what the entertainment, again, because she's producing comic books, that's what the entertainment should focus on in the future. But again, normies are realizing that you don't need to be afraid of these people anymore. They really don't have power. They're very few in number. And if you're not afraid of them, they have no power. And the polar opposite of the Mark Waid incident was really where it sparked Mark Waid's entire rant on the entire thing, was several statements made by Mark Millar, or Mark Miller, however it is you say his last name, who was and is a comic producer and is now a Netflix producer, and his statement saying that the people who try to cancel you, his term of cancel pigs, no longer have any relevance. Nor should they have ever had relevance, because they really have no power to cancel you unless you give them the power to cancel you. And once again, I don't see Mark Millar as being some triumphant hero here. I see him as being the first one to break that seal and to say what has been on the minds of other people for over a decade now, that yeah, this is nonsense. And this is nonsense. The entire woke entertainment system is nonsense, wherein they wish to produce a message rather than a product, rather than entertainment itself. It is all nonsense. Why? Because over this entire year, everyone has started to realize, from your hardcore science fiction and fantasy nerds to your everyday Joe who just wants to drink his light beer, we've all realized that, yeah, we're done with this. We were done with it long and ever ago, and we allowed you to carry on with what you were doing, sometimes out of fear, sometimes out of boredom, sometimes out of apathy, but we're not going to do that anymore. And when we said that we weren't going to do that anymore, showed them that we weren't going to do that anymore, they threatened us. Over and over again, they threatened us. And that threat did work on a lot of people for a little while, but it no longer has any impact. And quite honestly, it seems ridiculous that we actually had any fear of these people to begin with. So, if I've given you anything new to think about, hit like, hit the shield in the lower right-hand corner of your screen to subscribe, and leave me a comment. Tell me what you think about all this. And again, if you want some pure, good storytelling, entertainment that is there for entertainment's sake, you should click on some of those links in the description or the pinned comment and go on over and see if my graphic novels are for you. All right, I'll leave it there. I'll see you later. Bye.